PoliticsToday starts right now. We'll begin with updates on the whereabouts of Wagner mercenaries leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. The one man who seems to know is the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, who last month brokered a deal to end the armed mutiny in Russia. Lukashenko today said Prigozhin is now in St. Petersburg in Russia, or may have moved on to Moscow, confirming that he is not in Belarusian territory. He says the question of Wagner units relocating to Belarus had not been resolved and would depend on decisions by Russia and Wagner. On the other hand, the Kremlin says it is not tracking the mercenary leaders' movement. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters no date has been set for a meeting between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Belarusian president, and could not yet confirm details of what would be on the agenda. Peskov says Russia does not intend to monitor Prigozhin's movement at all. More on the Belarusian president, who says that he's ready to mediate peace talks if Moscow and Kyiv deem it necessary. Addressing reporters at a press conference earlier today, Mr. Lukashenko said it has become possible to talk to Ukraine and come to some sort of peaceful solution, and that he has been trying to explain and say why talks need to take place now. Belarus is a close ally of Russia and last month began taking delivery of Russian tactical nuclear weapons that the Russian president says are intended to deter the West from attempts to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. Over in Ukraine, at least 5 people, including 2 women aged 21 and 95, have been killed after a Russian rocket hit an apartment building in Lviv, west of Ukraine. Another 34 people were injured. President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed a tangible response to the overnight assault by what he describes as Russian terrorists.
This is the biggest attack on the western Ukrainian city's civilian infrastructure since Russia's full-scale invasion. Ukrainian officials put the death toll at 4, adding that 34 people have been wounded, including a child. Responders continue to work at the scene. They have managed to rescue 7 people from the rubble and evacuate 64 others. Drone footage shows the scale of destruction after a Russian missile attack hit an apartment building. The video released by the Presidential Press Service shows a wide, curving 4-story apartment building with parts of the upper floors missing or in rubble. Rescuers stand atop the building, searching through the debris for survivors and casualties, while some people are also seen on the street walking past mangled vehicles covered in ash. Mayor of Lviv, Andriy Sadovy, also released a video saying repair works would begin as soon as rescuers are done.
Emergency services and municipal services are working on site because it is possible there are still people under the rubble. We are organizing all the necessary help for the people. As you can see, the situation is very complex. There is very serious damage to the buildings. In the morning, we'll have to start repair works as soon as rescuers finish their work.
The posts from the officials followed widespread air alerts across Ukraine and reports of cruise missiles entering Ukrainian airspace.
Meanwhile, Russia says its forces have repelled Ukrainian attacks in the Donetsk, Krasny, Lyman, South Donetsk and Zaporizhia directions, while the Ukrainian side claimed to have kept advancing in the direction of Bakhmut. The Russian Defense Ministry says Russian forces carried out strikes on Ukrainian personnel, tanks, armored vehicles and other military equipment. Forces also hit Ukrainian armored vehicles, the US-made howitzers, and a drone control center in the Kupiansk and Kherson directions. In another development, 5 Ukrainian drones were shot down over the new Moscow region in Russia Tuesday morning, with no casualties reported. causing disruptions at Nukovo airport for almost 3 hours. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, says that about 30 battles had taken place in the frontline areas over the previous 24 hours. The Ukrainian army had also attacked concentration areas for Russian personnel and equipment, command posts and other targets. Joining us now is VOA's Anna Chernikova from Kyiv. Hi, Anna. It's good to see you. Talk to us. Is Ukraine concerned about the whereabouts of the Wagner leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin?
Good evening. If we analyze what's happening inside the country, the talks, the discussions, there is no much concern. However, Ukrainian intelligence, of course, is keeping their eye on this situation because definitely Wagner and his Wagner group and Prigozhin himself and his group of fighters had quite an important role in the battle at this war. So definitely Ukrainian intelligence is keeping their eye, but I could not say that there is a huge concern or that there are a lot of talks about his movements.
We also understand the Belarusian president wants to act as a mediator in the crisis, and that is if both countries agree. It's not likely he'll be given the opportunity because he's clearly on the side of Russia, but wouldn't the war be easily analyzed by anyone involved, whether actively or remotely in the invasion?
Here we have 2 points to discuss and to look at this at 2 different perspectives. So first of all, Ukraine considers Belarus as an occupied territory by Russia. So basically any proposals from which are coming from President Lukashenko himself and from Belarus in general with current government, which is now in Belarus, is considered by Ukrainian officials as Russian proposals and Russian talks, just using Lukashenko as a person who presents these talks. Secondly, Belarus territory is used and was used a lot in this war for shelling Ukraine and is still used by Russia for their nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, for their soldiers to be present there, for the equipment to be present there, and so on and so forth. So basically, Belarusian territory is used in this war by Russia as their own territory, we can put it this way. And this is, again, this is how it's considered here in Ukraine by Ukrainian officials. And these 2 points, I think, make it quite clear that Ukraine would definitely not accept Lukashenko as a person in between, as someone who can be, a negotiator, because, he is considered as Russian representative, as Russian ally, and it's really difficult to imagine him in this role. At least, if we talk about Lukashenko himself, and in general Belarus as a country who would be an intermediate. So
essentially negotiating fairly.
Exactly. So, Ukraine do not consider current Belarus government as an independent government, as first of all, and definitely consider, even if look at it from a different perspective, Ukrainian authorities and Ukrainian officials consider Lukashenko as one of the main allies for Putin. So it's not fair for him to be in the middle.
All right, but that doesn't also mean that Ukraine is averse to any kind of peace, and this is even with the counteroffensive that is ongoing.
Ukraine definitely wants peace, and this is what Ukrainian government and military is putting as a priority. But this peace is seen by Ukraine as liberating of Ukrainian land. So Ukrainian forces and armed forces and Ukrainian government are working in both directions in order to get to the point when negotiations could happen. But this negotiation should be happening considering that the whole territory of Ukraine is liberated. And this is the only way for a long-term peace, which is seen by Ukrainian government. And this was very clearly presented by President Zelensky, by military officials, by the Prime Minister of Ukraine, and also by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in general diplomatic team from Ukraine, because of course this is something that sorry.
No worries.
Sorry, I'm back. Sorry. Because, of course, this is something that, this is something that everyone wish, but this is only possible if the territory is liberated, and basically the battlefield at this point is the main negotiation table.
So on their terms, Anna, let's talk about the attacks in Lviv, which Ukrainian president has called tangible. It's not the first time Russia has attacked the city. What are you hearing as regards what's left and how many people in the city have been, living day to day?
Yeah, unfortunately, very tragic events are happening today in Lviv. Over the night in Lviv, it was an overnight attack. Siren went off in Kyiv as well, but this time Kyiv was not the target. I can say that for the moment, this is the most damaging attack on the city of Lviv, and Lviv is located in the western part of the country, and a lot of people flee there for basically to be in a safer place. And a lot of people, internally displaced people, are currently locating there. A lot of volunteering organizations and even diplomatic missions. And at first, a lot of diplomatic missions actually were located there, and now most of them are back to Kyiv. But still, this is considered as one of the main cities that accepted people from all over Ukraine, and still accepting because it is in the West. So this is definitely the most damaging attack. And unfortunately, one of the main targets, so there were 10 missiles. This was reported by the Ukrainian Air Force. 7 missiles were destroyed. 3 missiles, unfortunately, reached their target. And one of the main target was this residential building that we can see at the footage. Unfortunately, over 125, around 125 apartments are damaged. Three parts of the building are destroyed are damaged quite badly. And people, so rescue operation is still ongoing, and unfortunately people could possibly remain under the rubble. For the moment, we know about 5 victims, 5 people killed, and around 40 injured. So this is what we have for the moment. But again, as I said, unfortunately, numbers could change, and we will follow that.
And Anna, so perhaps it's not the best of times to be staying at such high-rise buildings due to the risks. While it's easy to say one has gotten used to the war in Ukraine, what's everyday like in Kyiv, especially? We know that you've been living months in a bunker.
You're quite correct when you're saying that people get used. It's really, it's really difficult to imagine how can you get used to such, to such conditions. But this is what's happening, and this is really sad that people have to get used to this. But from the other side, people cannot survive if they don't get used to the conditions. So I was in Kyiv for almost the whole time since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and I can say that there were tougher periods and easier periods, but definitely people are quite careful with all the official announcements in terms of missile and drones attacks, and people consider this quite seriously, and a lot of people are hiding, go to hide in a bunker. I myself, as you said correctly, was hiding especially during the months of May and also before, when these attacks were regular on Kyiv, because this is something that you're not only under the risk because of the missile or drone itself, but also due to the debris which are falling. And a lot of people are actually hiding, but also some people, as happened in Lviv, for example, some people don't have enough time to hide, because sometimes the missiles are some certain types of missiles. They are so fast that people just physically don't have enough time to hide. So, people get used, but again, you can never completely get used to such situation.
We understand that President Zelensky is in Bulgaria meeting with the president and prime minister, and also President Biden is set to announce some more package for Ukraine, weapons package that would include cluster munitions. All of this, I'm sure, brings to bear perhaps what Ukraine is hoping to gain. And this is, in addition to the counteroffensive. Are you optimistic? Is Ukraine optimistic indeed with the way things are now in the fight and the invasion?
Well, I can say that Ukraine is quite optimistic about the counteroffensive. There is a really, I think, good understanding inside the country that counteroffensive will not take, will take quite long time, so it will not be fast. People, of course, hope for additional help and additional support, and especially additional new weapons to be announced as an aid. Everyone is waiting actually today for this announcement by President Biden. We know that President Zelensky has this, this abroad meeting to Bulgaria. We know that he was discussing and even signed certain agreements with Bulgarian leaders, which are concerning Ukrainian future in NATO. In general, everyone here in Ukraine is expecting this upcoming next week summit, NATO summit, which should give certain at least signs for Ukraine about its future in NATO. So, and this comes all together with this counteroffensive, of course, and people are optimistic, but I should say that people are also really realistic about certain things. So I do not think that there are over expectations, but of course, as you know, Ukrainians is nation which try to be optimistic anyway. But again, people understand what to expect and what not. So I don't think that it's over optimism here. But people hope for some great news.
Anna Chernikova, VOA, joining us from Kyiv. Many thanks, and do continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
On Wednesday, the UN Security Council debated whether the latest Children and Armed Conflict report, which now includes Russian forces after the invasion of Ukraine. Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict said that in 2022, the UN verified 27,180 grave violations against children throughout the world. Representatives from the US, the UK called out Russian armed forces and affiliated groups for killing 136 children in Ukraine in 2022, and that's according to the report. Russia's representative to the United Nations denied the accusation and said the West and the Secretary General are carrying out a dirty information campaign against the Russian Federation.
27,180 grave violations against 18,890 children were verified by the United Nations last year. These include 2,880 violations that were late verified. 8,630 children were either killed or maimed. 7,622 children were recruited and used, and 3,985 children were abducted. These three violations remain the ones verified at the highest level, and all of them increased in 2022. 8,890 children were affected last year, and yet their stories are not told. Despite progress in some situations, grave violations against children continue to go unpunished, and perpetrators are unchecked by the national and international legal systems. I would like to underscore that the main perpetrators of the killing and maiming of children, attacks on schools and hospitals, and the denial of humanitarian access in 2022 were the armed and security forces of governments. And these are governments whose primary responsibility is to ensure the protection of civilians, including children.